I'm Chris Hansen. I'm going to need you to take a seat right over there because you're watching the whole podcast.
Welcome to The Whole. I am Rob Sprance.
I'm Lori Levine.
And I am very, very excited. Chris Hansen is joining us. Chris, we can go through this. 8 Emmy Awards.
No, 10.
10. Is it 10 or is it 8? What is
Way
it?
to be on the ball. I like that.
Well, what happened? So wait, is it 10 or is it 8?
It's 10.
It's 10. All right. So I
can't do all your research.
I've got 2
you gotta
pages
talk to
worth.
human beings. You know? It's like being in my guest journalism lecture.
Yeah. So here I am interviewing a journalist, and on the very first sentence, I have a mistake. So,
I keep them in check, though.
Yeah, she does. That's
Somebody's got it.
Now, most of you know Chris from his work on Dateline for so long. Of course, the To Catch a Predator, which is one of the most significant shows to come along in a long time in journalism in general. And I want to get into all of that stuff. But most importantly, it's good to have you back. Have a Seat with Chris Hansen on YouTube. He's back at it. You have new operations that you're doing. I know you're working out of Flint, Michigan for a lot of these. What made you want to get back into this? It's been about, 16 years since you've done the last To Catch a Predator?
Well, no, it's been more recent than that. We did the very first one about 17 years ago, and then we took a little bit of a break and then did another one in Fairfield, Connecticut 4 or 5 years ago, and then most recently a couple of months ago in Genesee County, Flint, Michigan, as you mentioned. And I thought it was time to get back out there and do some more investigations, and we're going to continue to do them both for the Have a Seat YouTube channel, and we're in discussions with a couple of different networks, and we'll figure out where that's going to land very shortly. But look, you think about it this way. More kids are online for longer periods of time in the pandemic than ever before. There are more social media platforms now than ever before, which means there is more opportunity than ever before for predators to contact kids. When we started this 17 years ago, we merely had decoys chatting in chat rooms on AOL and Yahoo. That was it. That's all we had. Today, every day there's a new platform. I mean, literally, I have to, research every day. My team's got to research every day just to keep up with what's out there now. Yeah. And so the danger level is still there. And, honestly, when we first started doing it, I thought we'd do it 2 or 3 times and nobody would show up. People would get hip to it. People would say, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't be doing this. And here we are 17 years later, and just recently in the investigations we did in Michigan, we had a Michigan prison guard. We had a contractor who did work in the Michigan governor's residence, the mansion. We had a guy who was a cop in Lebanon. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's it's funny that you brought up the differences in social media, between now and then, because at the time I think it was only like AOL chat or just a lot of just basic instant messaging. But now there's a lot more there. Kids are putting their photos online, and it's there's a lot more accessible to people. But what about from your end? What's changed with the technology? What's changed in the landscape doing it now versus then? Is it a little harder to pull off now? I know you don't have that juggernaut of NBC behind you. Does that make it easier to do or harder to do?
It's the same, really. I mean, the technology has become smaller, less expensive, so it's not $500,000 to do an investigation anymore like it once was. It's just much more streamlined and efficient because we know what we're doing. The equipment, the hidden cameras are way easier. I mean, we used to have to wire an entire house like a reality television set. Today, it's all wireless. I mean, you're doing it with iPads and it pushing buttons and recording, and you take it back and edit it. So it's made it a lot easier from that standpoint, because there are so many different avenues for contact between potential predators and kids. You have to know where to go, and it shifts literally on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis. 1 month thus and such is hot, and then people are on this platform, and then people are using TikTok, and then you're seeing people use interactive games, which is a big spot for this. And again, during the pandemic, you've got kids spending their entire lives online. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big, a big potential for predatory content.
Now, how do you find out about these now? So, how does it hit your radar, and what's your ratio of potential cases that actually turn into something that is real that you can follow through on? I'm sure it's a very saddening number either way.
It's hard to quantify because it's different in each investigation. It depends how long we're doing it. But, in an average investigation, say that we have decoys, either decoys working directly for us or decoys who work for a law enforcement agency, which typically is the way we do it now. They'll be working in an area for a period of days prior to the operation. And it's not hard to find guys who want to meet kids online. And so it's just a matter of, who's just chatting to get excited by the chat. Some people just do that. Some people get off in the chat, and seeing a picture and trying to get a kid to send them a sexy video. Some of it is used for extortion. You see this all the time on, Twitter and other places, and where a kid thinks he's talking to another young person, and they swap racy videos, and then they try to use that as extortion. So there's some of that. So I would say, out of every 5, 6, 7 people who chats, maybe one agrees to come over. And out of that, it's even less. Somebody gets lost other ways. Somebody gets cold feet. Somebody, but it's hard. There's no hard quantifiable percentage in each investigation. It's different every time we go on.
Mm-hmm. And now, I've watched some of Have a Seat, and it's got the same great intensity to it. It's got the same, I don't want to use the word great, but let's face it, it's riveting, which is why so many people like to see it. And then, I know you have law enforcement there, you have everyone there, and still when you have those moments, the Have a Seat moments, as I never thought a show like this would have a catchphrase, but there it is.
I know. Right.
When you have those Have a Seat moments, I still, to this day, am dumbfounded with not only that they talk to you, but then just their answers are just, it's baffling to me because it's clear that they're going, they're always never there for sex. It was just because I needed a friend and whatever it is.
I just wanted to talk.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk.
Or I wanted to check on the girl to make sure she was okay because she was obviously headed into trouble. And I know her parents were there. We get that. We still get it. We had it in the latest investigation in Michigan. I guarantee you we'll get it again at some point the next time.
But then when you pull out the conversation, that's the best part.
Well, the chat logs tell everything. And, the chat log really, at the end of the day, and in most states, is where the crime takes place. It's the solicitation of a minor. And so in many cases, the crime is already committed by the time they show up. And my confrontation with them and the ensuing drama, conflict, emotion, train wreck, however you want to characterize it, is icing on the cake. That just shows intent, and it's an admission.
Yeah, and I've noticed there's a slight difference, unless the editing of the way Catch a Predator was. Are you the first person they see, or does law enforcement get them first?
We did a couple of different sting operations in Genesee County near Flint, and in the very first one, because of COVID, actually, we had some restrictions and some distance and some control issues, and because of the setup, we did it a little different than what we historically have done. That was just the one that you've seen so far. Mm-hmm. Subsequent to that, I have the first contact, yeah.
Okay. Were the predators wearing masks?
Some were.
Yeah.
Some were.
Well, you got to be safe.
I mean, it was a little challenging to do. Now, things are loosening up a little bit. The next one, I'm sure, will be a little easier to navigate. But life has changed during the pandemic, even in the world of hunting predators.
Yeah, and so you've even at one point teamed up with Insane Clown Posse for one of those. Tell me a little bit about that.
We did an investigation into a metal rocker of modest fame, but a high-level predator target named Davi Vanity. Mm-hmm. And this guy is under investigation for literally dozens and dozens of sexual assaults, sexual impropriety involving underage girls. I mean, this was his thing. And I interviewed dozens and dozens of victim survivors on the YouTube show I Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. And, the feds are investigating, local law enforcement in different areas are investigating. And unbeknownst to me, ICP, also from the Detroit area, like I am, took a stand against people in the music business acting this way, being predators. And I thought, well, this could be interesting. So I called their agent. I said, hey, not for nothing, but I'd like to have them on the show to talk about this. Well, it turns out they're somewhat fans of mine, and they agreed to appear on the show. And I said, great. So we booked it. And a lot of people watch that show, and they're, very popular. And so it sort of started a bit of a collaboration with them. And they're lovely guys, and I didn't know they had it To Catch a Predator song, which is genius. I ended up playing in the background when I did the interview with them. And ain't nothing gonna come for that, but it sure is fun. And so they said, well, we'll appear, but we want a favor back. Would you come in the studio and do some stuff with us? And I hosted a couple things with them, and they're great guys. I mean, they're just their music is a different genre, but it's very clever and smartly written, and they're just good guys from Southwest Detroit out there, carving out their craft, making a living. So I got to be pals with them. Yeah, and
they have a fan level that is very hard to match.
Devoted. I mean, the Juggalos, and again, they've been hamstrung, on what they normally do because of the pandemic. But I'm sure they'll get out there soon. They've had a lot of virtual events, but yeah, those people are extremely loyal. And there's a huge crossover between, for whatever reason, Juggalos and fans of To Catch a Predator, Takapalos, I guess we could call them. But
the community is really tight knit, so I think that's the whole thing.
Very
and
loyal.
The whole the motto is also looking after each other. So that it's really crazy. I would never put those two together. Right? It is, and thousands of people.
Yep. So before I get into the origins of that and Dateline for that matter, you're also investigating Peter Nygard right now.
Yes.
For a completely different show. So this is not going to be on Have a Seat. This is a completely separate thing, right?
This is an investigation I did with Blackfin Productions, the production company with which I work, and it's now streaming on Discovery Plus. And it was a heavy lift. I'm one of the executive producers, and it was, really from start to, research to getting the tip on the whole thing to putting it together and seeing it on television. It was just about 2 years. Peter Nygard is a multi-millionaire fashion mogul. And his claim to fame is designing and manufacturing jeans that were sold at like Dillard's and mid-level stores. And he did some private label stuff for other people, and it was sold at Saks, Blosses, and things. And he made a ton of money. Yep. And along the way, he had a reputation as being a playboy, but he was, featured on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and got a lot of press. And he had a big home in Marina Del Rey. He still has it. He had a home up in Winnipeg, and this huge compound that resembles Jurassic Park in the Bahamas. And we started to get information that he was involved in decades of brutal sexual assault, human trafficking, up to and including, according to investigators, impregnating young girls in the Bahamas after drugging them.
And then abortion.
Exactly. Forcing them to have abortions and harvesting the stem cells to inject in himself in this sort of fountain of youth. So it all started, it was essentially a beachfront battle between billionaires in the Bahamas. And he was neighbors to a fellow named Louis Bacon. And they got into a grudge match over property, civility. And Nygard was just a bad guy and wanted to bury Bacon and launched this huge misinformation campaign accusing him of horrible things. And, what do you think is going to happen? Bacon gets his team together. They start digging into Nygard stuff, and lo and behold, all these horrifying criminal allegations come out.
Yeah.
They make their way to the feds and to me and to other people in the media, the CBC, the New York Times was working on it. And we all started to dig in. And it was a hard story to put together. This guy is very litigious, and he's got a lot of money, and he was able to keep a lid on things in Canada for a long time. And he was able to intimidate the victims and buy them off and threaten them. And he bought off politicians in the Bahamas. I mean, money stuffed in fish. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Wow.
And so ultimately we got down to the Bahamas a year ago, late February and March, and interviewed a lot of these victims down there. We had victims, Beverly Peel and other famous models who were victimized by him in the series on Discovery Plus. And we were lucky enough to get the Bahamas angle of it done right before the shutdown. We returned from the Bahamas on March 5th of 2020. And, just days later, that was it. Wow, so we continued to piece it together, and we were able to do the rest of the interviews remotely, and finally things opened up a little bit. But it's a hell of a ride and a very compelling series. And he's in jail now. He was arrested right before the series started to air, premiered. And he's awaiting extradition in a jail cell in Winnipeg, Canada. And they're not even going to have an extradition hearing until November, I'm now told.
Okay. Yeah. So when are we going to be able to see that, and where?
That's out right now. So if you go to Discovery Plus
Beautiful.
And look up Unseemly, the Peter Nygard investigation, it's out now.
Okay. Excellent. So I wanted to get a little more into your origin because, as an investigative journalist, especially with Dateline, you've been with us through so many huge moments. I mean, Columbine, 9/11, the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, you've been involved in so many. And while you're associated mostly with To Catch a Predator, there's so much more there before that even began, and hard work in that as well. How did you wind up getting into this to begin with? What made you want to be a journalist? Do you kind of fall into it with your skill set? Do you always want to do that and go after it? How does that work?
It's funny. I grew up about a mile and a half from where Jimmy Hoffa was kidnapped, from where he was last seen, at a restaurant called the Red Fox in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. And it was big news, obviously, worldwide, but especially when you live a mile and a half from it and your neighbors are involved in the investigation and you drive by the restaurant, your parents are talking about it. I was 14, 15, I suppose, at the time. And I used to ride my bike up to the restaurant, and they had it taped off, and FBI was there, and local police were there, and the network correspondents and the local reporters. And I became fascinated and enthralled with the story. And so I guess, got bit by the bug then. And when I went off to college in Michigan State, day one, I signed up for the radio station, and suddenly I was a reporter. And, I worked with a lot of really smart kids, and got a chance to work at the college newspaper and commercial radio. And then as a senior, I was able to finagle my way into a television job, actually, part-time at the NBC station, reporting, covering as many fires and, city council meetings that I could possibly cover.
So like a local correspondent. Yeah.
And so when I graduated, I went full-time, stayed another year, covered the Capitol, and it was a great experience. And again, very fortunate to start out working for some great people who became mentors. Went down to Tampa for a couple of years, to Detroit, where I was a reporter for 10 years. And then in 1993, came out to New York and started working for the network.
So what's your first big piece that you're proud of? And, I know that you mentioned that you had, you've done little things, city council, local stuff. What's the first big piece where instead of just kind of reporting on what's happening locally for the day, where you decided to dive into a piece and really start to dig in and do interviews and start to really uncover things versus just reporting on what's happening?
The first story that I think really stands out that way, I was covering in Detroit the crack cocaine epidemic, and I had essentially embedded, although we didn't know it was called that at the time, with a task force called the No Crack Task Force. And so it was Detroit Police Department and the DEA and ATF and Customs and Immigration. And I would cover regular news, whether it was a shooting or a political event or whatever was going on, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But they'd give me a day here and there to go on drug raids. In those days, this is 1980, 85, 86, you could go on drug raids. And I developed a level of trust with this team where they would let me go in. It would literally be the Ram, the shotgun, the Helican, my cameraman, and me, along with the team. And we went through the door.
Yeah.
And you could get away with that in those days. And so through the course of doing this, basically to work on a story about the crack cocaine epidemic, I was on a raid when they started to find videotapes made of a drug organization called the Chambers Brothers. And these
like
guys made videos of themselves counting money. We rich, goddammit. We're going to buy 3 cars tomorrow. Energy, tours of the house, 24 karat gold faucets and cars, all this stuff. So I got my hands on these tapes and I held them for 18 months until the investigation got to the point where no undercovers were involved. And we broke this in a 5-part series on Channel 7 Action News at 11, anchored by Bill Bonds. And it turned the city upside down. That we had this, that we knew about this, that we could take people inside a drug family. And it blew people's minds. I mean, it made the network. So everybody wanted to talk to Chris Hansen about going from Detroit to Washington to here to there, everywhere. And it sort of, in a way, I think, punched my ticket. And it also, got my attention that enterprise reporting, taking people on a journey of discovery, showing them things they wouldn't normally see anywhere else or hear anywhere else, was the way to do this. And so I would constantly look for opportunities to do that. And we had some other corruption stories that I was able to get, inside on and break. And those are the kinds of stories that, add up and get, people's attention at NBC and other places and allow you to make that next step from, local news to the network news.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that Washington was an option for you as well. It's interesting if you think about it. Making that decision then could have completely changed the trajectory of your career, not just for going, Dateline, but once you're covering Washington, you almost become that. You become that correspondent. You become that political person, and that's all that you're involved in. Was that ever a decision that you had to mull over, or was it pretty simply you just wanted to come and do investigation?
Well, it's a great question, because I don't know that I honestly analyzed it that thoroughly at 27, 28 years old. When that opportunity came up, my contract was up at Channel 7. It had been an ABC-owned operation. It was spun off to Scripps Howard. The money was a lot tighter at that moment. And so when I went to go renegotiate, they weren't throwing money at me. I mean, there was a raise involved, but I'd been there 3 years and I thought I deserved more. And I, went to Washington and talked to, the folks there at the ABC station there. And it was nice folks that used to run one of the stations in Detroit. I ultimately went from the ABC to the NBC, which offered me, more money than a 28-year-old should have. Be a street reporter in Detroit as a single man,
Right.
But and that was I went across the street and worked 5 years at the NBC station, and it was a great, Detroit's a great news town, and at the time it was just very, very competitive. I mean, we got up in the morning and just ate raw meat, and we were ready to compete. I mean, each station had, their version of a guy like me, and we just went to battle every day, and it was no holds barred. You went out to win, and it was a lot of fun.
Now, what about when you get to Dateline? What about internal competition? Because, everyone wants to make their mark, and rightfully so. There's only so much stories to go around, especially the big ones. Do you have to kind of earn your wings, so to speak, for a while first?
Yeah, I was very lucky, because most people go from local news to, nightly news, which is great, and it's just different than the news magazine world. And because of the way this came about, I was originally in discussions with NBC in '91 to go to the London bureau, and I was willing to do it. I thought it'd be a great experience, and they ended up eliminating the position because of budget cuts after the first Gulf War. And so come around to 1993, Dateline was on the air, but they wanted to have a second news magazine. And so I got hired to do that, and that went away before it ever aired and became a show called Now that was anchored by Tom Brokaw and Katie Couric. So I was one of the 5 correspondents for that show. And that very first year, we didn't have anything on the shelf. So we were on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock. And so I was the guy who did breaking news. So literally most week, Jeff Zucker was the executive producer, and Beth O'Connell was his second in command. And Paul
Some
Greenberg,
heavy hitters across the board there.
Yeah, and Paul Greenberg, was the number 3 guy there. All of whom were so good to me and so nurturing, even at this competitive network level, that that made my career at NBC, because I came from local news. It's very staccato. You have to tell the story in 2 minutes or less, and suddenly I'm at a news magazine where you have to tell a story, you have to narrate. And these people would sit with me in the audio booth and say, no, that's not how we do. We do it like this, and literally took me by the hand and taught me how to be a better news magazine correspondent. But we would, it'd be Saturday afternoon, phone would ring and say, okay, what's my nickname was Crash. And so what's Crash going to do? I said, well, let's think about this. It could be Michael Jackson. It could be Polly Klaas being kidnapped and murdered in Petaluma. It could be the Unabomber. It could be any number of things. But I would literally get on a plane Sunday, work straight through until the piece aired Wednesday at 9, go to the staff meeting Thursday, get my head patted, and crash Friday, Saturday, just out, and wait for the phone to ring on Sunday.
Wow.
And it was, whether it was, the Tanya Harding case, all those things happened in 93, 94. I mean, it was, we were rocking and rolling. I mean, the aftermath of Waco, all of this stuff. And I had worked on the Unabomber case in Detroit, and very early on when he had sent a bomb to a professor at the University of Michigan. So I was hooked in there. And I had a lot of connections in Detroit with guys who were in federal law enforcement who then went to Washington or New York. And because I nurtured those relationships, I could pick up the phone and get information. And that was currency for me at the network. And so I began to expand those circles of contacts, and it led to, where I am today.
Just so you know, on a side note, you don't have to actually lean in because we hear you just fine when you're straight up. So you don't have to. Just so you know, you sound just great either way.
Awesome.
So you mentioned 2 heavy hitters there as far as Katie Couric and Tom Brokaw. I mean, Tom Brokaw, they're both legends. But what's it like working with those anchors? I mean, you see everything from fictional stories about what it's really like in the news versus versus the reality of it. What's it like working for a guy like Tom Brokaw? What's it like working with someone like Katie Couric and working with them?
They're lovely people. I mean, it was it was a wonderful experience. Katie was great to me. And even when Now merged into Dateline, Katie would still do stories for Dateline occasionally, but mostly obviously for the Today Show. And I would appear on the Today Show frequently, and always had a very warm, cordial relationship with her, and just a total pro, and somebody who could have fun, in the breaks between very serious, important stories. She related to people in a way that very few anchor people do. You have a case with her, I think, and she related to men and women, and just connected, and was very smart and came up as a reporter, like many of us did, and that showed, I think. And she took her job seriously, but never took herself too seriously. Brokaw was just the consummate gentleman, and just a good guy to joke around with. But one of the true moments of my career when I truly felt, okay, you've made it, was in 95 when we were covering the Oklahoma City bombing. And I was in, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on some story. And I took 5 flights and got out there that night after the bombing, because we were talking back and forth. And was it a gas explosion? Was it a pipeline? And I started to get information from federal sources that, no, somebody blew up the damn building, and it could be related to the Patriot movement and all that. So I got my ass out there, and I got there about midnight, and we had a hardware store in downtown Oklahoma City as our base, and we had a forklift with a pallet on it that would lift us up to the roof. And I got up there and saw it, and thought, this is the worst thing I will ever see.
Yeah.
And the following night or the night after, we went live for Dateline, and I got to be live next to Tom Brokaw, who debriefed me. And I'm just, I'm taking this as seriously as you can ever take an assignment. I mean, the weight of the world, I feel, is on my shoulders. Yeah. And we're telling a story of what I thought would be the very worst possible thing that America would ever see on our grounds. And, 168 people dead, children, a tale of, treason, essentially. And
it's still the worst domestic terrorist attack on our nation, right?
Domestic by an American, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. 168 people. And, ironically, all these years later, the two oldest boys are also in the business. One's behind the scenes in television and film production. The other was a reporter for the Fox station in Oklahoma City, on-air reporter. And his apartment looks down on the memorial site of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Oh, and to walk through there, especially with him, and to tell the story, your old man was here, 25 years ago, when you were 1 and watched all this happen. And now you live in the building where the security camera captured the actual U-Haul van pulling up and exploding. Yeah. It just, in some ways, I think has come full circle. But to work with Brokaw, and I got off course here, but to work with Brokaw was phenomenal. And whether you talk to him about skiing with Robert Redford, or you talk to him about fly fishing, or whether you talk to him about news or joking around, or a splendid guy to have a cocktail with, I mean, just a total class act all the way around.
Yeah. So you've also done pieces overseas. You did a piece about child labor in India. You did a piece about prescription drugs in China. The element of danger that there must be sometimes, and it may not be those specific ones, but was there ever a time where you were genuinely afraid, where you whether it's, I mean, there's so much that you've covered. Like, what's the most nervous or afraid that you've been where you realize maybe I'm not just safe just because I'm a journalist?
Well, when we were heading over to China in Hong Kong to do the pharmaceutical, the counterfeit story, we had it pretty much set up that we knew we'd go over there posing as American businessmen and buy counterfeit Viagra and do the deal, catch it on hidden camera, and bring it back. And, we had interviews with executives at Pfizer, and we had stories of people got harmed with counterfeit pharmaceuticals. And so it was a big deal. But to go over there and do this in China, and to get in there, we didn't go in on journalism visas because you'd have a minor. We went in on corporate, visas, and we didn't lie because actually GE owned, NBC at the time, so we went as GE executives, and I was okay with it, and I didn't, I didn't really have too much fear, and I had been through Hong Kong on the way to Cambodia on, child sex exploitation, sex tourism over there. And so I had a feel for Hong Kong. Shanghai is different. It's at one level, it's very much like being in New York. There's nothing to worry about. But you go 2 blocks off the main drag, and they're cutting off, duck heads in the streets, and, serving all kinds of bizarre dragon food. Yeah. But when I was getting ready to go, I was having a chat with a fellow in the CIA who we had just interviewed, an outgoing ranking CIA official for a profile. And they both looked at me and said, "You're not going to China, are you, as a journalist with hidden cameras?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you out of your mind?" I said, "Well, how bad can it be?" He goes, "They'll lock your ass up." And so now I got 2 CIA guys telling me how dangerous it is. So that gave me pause.
Sure. So
I said, "Well, we're going to do it. What advice do you have?" They said, "Well, don't go over there like big shots and rent the presidential suite in the Ritz. Stay in a nice hotel, but don't stay in the presidential suite." I said, "Why not?" "Because they're all wired. They'll be listening to you live.
Yes.
And when you go to the bathroom, turn the shower on full blast hot and look at the mirror. And if there's an area in the mirror in the bathroom where there isn't steam and it's circular, that's where the hidden camera is."
Oh, wow.
And so, they can't bug every room, but they bug some rooms. And they bug a lot of the rooms where Americans are. And we were able to get in and get out of there without incident. But yeah, but there was one case we went to, not on the child labor story in India, but we did a story on human drug testing, pharmaceutical companies. And we actually got a drug that had been banned to be tested, and they knew it, and we knew it. It was dangerous, and the drug had been linked to tens of thousands of heart attacks and strokes in this country, and it was banned. So we get over there, and we're in the complex, the office for the pharmaceutical testing firm. And we're in the meeting, we have the hidden cameras, and I say to him, I said, well, there's something you need to know. I'm not really the president of Hansen Pharmaceuticals. I'm Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC. It's a show in America, and we're doing a story, X, Y, and Z. And the cameras come out, and they freak, and they bring security in.
Oh, wow.
And they detain us in this conference room.
Yep.
And these red beret wearing Saddam Hussein looking security guys are all there. Now I've got myself, the producer, the associate producer, and 2 camera guys. And I've got a camera guy out in the truck. Now the lawyers know we're there. The State Department sort of knows we're there. And I make the call, and one of the crew wants to fight our way out of it. I said, then you touch anybody, that's assault. Just stay cool. Let's take turns going to the bathroom, take the chips from the cameras that they don't know that we have. Mm-hmm. All they know is that we pulled cameras out of the bag to get their reaction. They don't know the whole thing's recorded.
Right.
So take your turn, let things settle down, tell them you need to use the bathroom, let's hide all the chips wherever we need to hide them, and just get through the day. And so the whole rolling circus of it all ends up at the local Indian police precinct. And the Indian commander, the inspector there, he's shaking his head. It's like, so what? They're journalists. They didn't do anything wrong. They're allowed to do with this. And they walked back and forth, and the State Department got involved. And anyway, we were freed and let go. And a cold Kingfisher beer never tasted so good that I would get that. And we're in the state of Gujarat, which is dry. So you have to, to get beer is like adopting a child. You have to stamps and passports and things. We didn't mind. Fortunately, had some waiting in the hotel room, so we all had cold beer and relax. But yeah, I mean, those, intellectually you're going to be okay, But
you hope.
What are they going to do? You are in a civilized nation. I mean, what worries me most, quite honestly, in any of those stories, whether it's in Africa, we're in Sierra Leone on Al Qaeda using blood diamonds. We went to West Africa on a scam story. What worries me most, honestly, is being in a substandard vehicle without seatbelts and getting in a wreck in a crazy traffic area,
really,
and dying, or getting a bad transfusion or something like that, losing blood. I mean, but yeah, we do. And you never toast until you're above 10,000 feet when you're out of the shoulder-fired missile.
It's probably a smart.
Those are my two great pieces of advice for you.
Yeah, I was getting shades of locked up abroad there for a minute when you're telling that story. So we had the actual Billy Hayes on from the Midnight Express fame.
Oh yeah. Great movie.
And he was telling us that story too. And you always think that, hey, I'm an American. Like they can't do this to me. I'm okay. They're not gonna. No one's gonna bother me because I'm an American. Yeah. But you never know. So, whoever you're wise to advise him not to fight his way out of it. There was not a.
Well, there was a look, and there was a moment where we could confab, and he said, "We're just pushing way out of this." And I said, if we get out that door, then we got through. I'm not, saying they would have shot us or harmed us, but if you touch somebody, that's battery. And not being intimately familiar with the laws of the state of Gujarat in India, but knowing the basics of it for the story, I said, it's just going to make this go on longer and be more time before we're back at the hotel laughing about this over a cold beer. So let's keep it cool for a minute.
Yeah. So what brings up the idea to do the very first segment to Catch a Predator? Because it was a segment before it was anything else.
Correct.
So what gives you the idea to do it? And then is everyone jump on board with this kind of thing? Is it maybe a little too taboo for the network? Are they concerned about it at first when you have this idea?
I was in a conversation with a fellow who took my job in Detroit when I went to NBC, and he told me about this online watchdog group called Perverted Justice. And I started thinking, wow, if we could use their ability to be decoys online with our ability to wire a house with hidden cameras and microphones, it could be very compelling. And at the time, perverted justice would have a decoy would go online if the decoy was approached by an adult male or adult anybody, and there was a sexually charged conversation and an act of solicitation, they would merely post the man's identity on the website. And so we took this to the next level. And so in February of 2004, we set up a house in Bethpage, Long Island, and I pitched the story, and they bought off on it, and we had a very good producer team, and we all figured this out, but we did not have law enforcement doing a parallel investigation in those first couple of investigations. So, we have the house all wired up. Ron Knight, who is a security guy with NBC, former NYPD guy, goes through the house, and we have a security protocol. But, we're doing this for the first time. So I'm literally driving out to the location, and I get stuck in traffic getting on the Throgs Neck Bridge to get over to Long Island. And I start to daydream and think, what if nobody shows up? What if I've just wasted tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money? Yeah. And with that, the phone rings. It's my producer, Lynn Keller, who says, where the hell are you? We've got 2 guys scheduled to show up in 45 minutes. So traffic clears. I get there, and, we got the transcripts all over the dining room table. And, I get the transcripts, and the first guy who shows up, and I'm just trying to keep my, heart in my chest from popping up in my throat, and we do it. And it goes pretty well, and it's interesting. And wow, that was something. The next guy comes, and the third guy shows up, and I walk out with the wrong transcripts. So the information doesn't match. I said, you're here to, do this, that, and the other thing with a 12-year-old named Susan. No, not me. Hang on, go back. Second set of transcripts. 13-year-old named Beth. No, it's not me. 8-year-old named Kathy.
Wrong pedophile.
Okay. And so when I wrote the book about the whole Predator experience, they actually edited those 3 things together for the hour special that they did. And it was just to see it together. I told the story a million times in speeches and amongst friends and things like that. But to see it edited together, you could see, wow, they were still trying to figure out how this worked. So we do it, and then we're messing around. Is it 2 segments? Is it 1 long segment? It's not really a whole show yet. We had 17 guys show up in 2.5 days.
17
guys serviced in 2.5 days, including a New York City firefighter who didn't show up, but he was servicing the investigation. We didn't come to the house. We went to find him later, and he was ultimately prosecuted by the FBI. But we knew we had something that was compelling and something different and something that had never been done on television before. But there was some anxiety among the network executives. And I remember specifically a meeting where one of the executives said, I just don't know how we're going to promote this. And I was sort of getting irritated and edgy and about it all. And I said, you know how to promote it? I said, here's how you promote it. There's a man with his junk in his hand on your back porch, and he's trying to have sex with your teenage daughter. Tonight, we're going to show you how to prevent that. That's how you promote it. Yep. And everybody went silent and said, Hansen's lost his mind this time. But
meanwhile,
every went off, and then so in that fall, it aired.
Yeah. Meanwhile, every news. Sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Did you know when you were creating the show that the predators would sit? Because that's the best part of the show. When you speak to the predator, when the child, the decoy, walks away and you sit there with them, they all sit there.
I was a little surprised, actually. And again, so much of this was, just the necessity of having to figure out how to get the guy in the right place. So that I'm going to need you to have a seat right over there, was to sort of get control over the environment. I didn't think it was going to become the catchphrase of a lifetime and a career.
Yeah.
And such an iconic thing. It was just, you need to sit down over there. I remember we had a guy in one of the investigations in Ohio, and he was a dwarf. And a bad guy. He had a criminal history, a very bad criminal history, and spent a lot of time in prison. But I kept saying, you need to have a seat, you need to sit. He goes, no, I'm good, I'm standing. I said, no, I needed to get him on this bar stool so he'd be in the frame of the television, because he never couldn't stand because he was short. I said, get in the damn chair in the stool. So, I think what initially happened was the predator didn't know whether I was the mad dad the detective.
True, yeah.
They didn't know I was Chris Hansen in the first couple of ones. They, people started to figure that out and even get kind of excited that, I get to meet Chris Hansen. That's not the way you want to meet Chris Hansen.
Some people I did react like that.
Oh, yeah. No, I met a guy in the Jersey Shore who got all excited, 25-year-old. He said, this is great. I said, it's not great. Did you realize what you just walked into? He said, I watch the show all the time. When I miss them, I download them from the internet. I said,
I mean, I know. Go ahead, Franco, go.
I think the most memorable thing is you sitting, like somebody sitting down and then going like, you know what, I'm going to have a drink. You mind if I have a drink? And then like, I will always remember that one specific person who decided to like, you guys used to have like either water or punch or something like that. And they just like started drinking it. Yep. And somebody actually drank it and you were like, yeah, go for it, I guess. Make yourself at home.
Yeah. A few years ago, we had, a fellow show up with pizza in Fairfield, Connecticut. He's eating the pizza. Jeff Solo eating the pizza throughout the entire interview. Offers me a slice. I said, offers the crew slice. And he's become iconic. It's funny because you talk about those moments, and the parodies and it being so iconic. I mean, the Predator investigations are what 5-10% of my portfolio, maybe, but it is. Without a doubt, what I'm known for, what I'm attached to. And so I've, been able to use that for good, I think, to raise awareness and create a dialogue and have access to things I wouldn't normally have access as a reporter. But, and when my boys were in high school, having a dad on TV wasn't a big deal. They went to high school with kids whose dads were, captains of industry and Wall Street titans, and that's dad's on TV. That's cool, whatever. But when South Park did a Chris Hansen To Catch a Predator parody,
yes,
and suddenly I was the coolest dad there was. Right. And I was a made man at that point. I made it.
That's how you know you made it. Yeah, absolutely. You did mention one of the first few that you didn't have law enforcement backing. Right. So what was it? Was it just you humiliate them and they leave? So like they were just able to go?
We would do the confrontation. They would leave. And in many cases, law enforcement was able to make a case afterwards. For instance, in the very first one, the firefighter was charged. I think that was the only one in the first investigation. In the second one, Fairfax police were able to make some successful prosecutions. And the rabbi who showed up in that investigation was prosecuted by the FBI and served 6.5 years in prison, and has been in and out of prison since then. He can't seem to stay out of trouble, David Kay. But after the second one, I had kind of a realization that going forward, it would be the socially responsible thing to do. And purely as a guy who makes television, a more satisfying resolution for the viewer if the guy was arrested, legitimately based on probable cause and evidence after my confrontation. And it was right at that time we got a call from authorities in Riverside, California, who were willing to do an investigation, a parallel investigation. So that was the third one we did, and we went out there and set up and with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and they were great. And in 3 days, 51 men showed up at a house in Riverside.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was actually the teenage boy or girl.
Unbelievable.
Wait, Chris, you're known for that, but you're also, in researching you, something you don't talk about enough is that you are down as one of the 7 sexiest alumni of Michigan State, and I really think this should be a bigger deal.
Where was that? I need to tell Gabrielle about that. Those are great. Right? The 7th?
Yeah, well, Magic Johnson got number 1.
All right, he's a good guy. We were in the same class at Michigan State, by the way. He got to leave after sophomore year and make $1 million a year at the Lakers. I stayed for $4.75 an hour in radio, but I've seen him a lot over the years at basketball games and university football. He's a lovely, lovely guy.
Yeah,
so I'm only 7?
Yeah, I was going to say.
They took the top 7. I think you're number 4.
Wait, I'm 4? I need to get this right because I think it's.
I remember Jamil Hill.
Yeah.
She's on it, and Kirk Cousins, but I can't remember the others.
That's funny. So I'm 7.
You are not you're number 4 of 7.
4 of 7.
Yes.
Wow.
See, I think we need to become investigative journalists and figure out why. Chris, you've dropped. We're going to go undercover. We're going to see if this is fixed, and we're going to bring a crew, And we're gonna.
I'm okay with 4.
That's over the whole course of Michigan State.
Yeah, it's a lot of students there. It's a big school.
And you're probably a better QB than
Kirk
what's his face?
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, than Kirk Cousins.
He's done pretty well.
I know. I'm gonna find that judge, and I'm gonna say, "Why don't you have a seat over here? I want to know why." I don't know why Chris is only number 4. So I know we don't have too much time left, but I did want to take a minute to kind of touch on what journalism has become, for all the good and bad that it's become. The amount of false stories that are out these days because of social media that people are just buying. The fact that almost anyone now with a camera can pretend to be a journalist, turn on their camera and live stream something and just pretend that the story is what it is without any vetting. The fact that, you've got all of these false stories going around. The fact that Alex Jones has claimed that you're dead, which I don't quite get, but I think
I don't know where that came from. I went on Andrew Schultz's show the week after that to show that I was alive.
Well, I think maybe what it stems from, and I didn't see the episode, but I was thinking about it. Maybe it's that whole QAnon pedophile thing that he's behind.
He might have been just talking faster than his mind was working, and I don't know, Alex. But I don't know. I'm not sure why he would say he was dead. But your question is an important one, and we could do a whole show on it because it is insane what someone can do with a highly sophisticated editing program and no editorial knowledge, no facts. And I do this, I could run across this all the time because we have done, the other series that's out on Discovery Plus right now is about a YouTuber who is, considered the Jeffrey Epstein of YouTube. And he's under criminal investigation. And because of our story, he was demonetized on YouTube. Onision is his screen name, and his real name is Gregory James Jackson. And he's accused of all kinds of bullying and sexual impropriety and abusing women. And we had some of his victims in the series. In fact, part 4 of the series comes out later this month. But I had started doing stories on it on my YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, and it grew from that into a television series. And along the way, this guy absolutely, without a doubt, manufactured a misinformation campaign targeting me in the online digital community, all kinds of horrible things. And that's what people can do. And so, especially when there's resentment of somebody who's operating successfully in the YouTube space, which, mostly is a millennial space, it causes, a ripple, and it causes backlash. And people can say and do things that aren't based in truth and make it look important because it's flash edited. It's whiz bang stuff. And Tom Friedman of the New York Times wrote a great op-ed piece months ago about how we need to teach a civics class to our young people today to realize that just because something's online doesn't mean it's true. So true. I mean, we these kids can gin up a misinformation campaign, just like the Russians did in the 2016 and 2020 election. Mm-hmm. And people buy into it. I mean, you don't know how many times that I see kids just using Wikipedia or other online sources, and I preach this to my kids in the business. What will always rule in this business is human contact, human connection, and the ability to gather information from human beings. Online is important, but computer-aided reporting, computer-assisted reporting is not going to rule because you're only getting information unless you're digging deep into a government database of some sort. You're just getting regurgitated information. I can't even access my own Wikipedia page to put a better picture up. Wow. Or to have my people or correct inaccuracies. I can't get into it because I'm a celebrity and you're not allowed to get into a celebrity's Wikipedia. Well, I'm the guy.
Yeah.
I can't, any other knucklehead or a group of knuckleheads can get in there and do whatever they want, but I can't get in there. I've taken this to the very highest levels of Wikipedia, and we're working on it. But it just goes to show how easily somebody can create a misinformation campaign. And I've watched it. I've been the target of it.
Yeah. Not only that now, what makes it scarier is that it's been weaponized by a political party.
Oh.
Like, it's literally been weaponized now. So now it's not just misinformation. Now it's not just foreign countries meddling and creating misinformation. Now you have people that have been elected and chosen by Americans, and some gullible enough to buy it, are actually using it to their advantage to further themselves.
The stolen election. And look what happened at the Capitol on January 6th.
Yep.
I guess like the worst part of it all is that I feel like a lot of times with misinformation, people maybe are aware that it is misinformation, but the fact that it's there and it's like tangible for them just kind of like further backs their case and just like kind of further spreads whatever it is that people are breeding within their echo chambers.
I think you're absolutely right. And they'll use that. Some people will use that to their advantage, knowing that it's false, but because it's out there, it's win at any cost.
Right.
And I've watched it.
The real question is, what's the way out of it? And that's the part I don't know if there is.
I wish I had the answer for that. I really do. And I think it's like any other serious issue where there is, the potential for great harm, and that's in education and awareness. I mean, if you have a crime, if you have an issue, you either have demand reduction, which is what we try to do with the drug problem, or you have education, which is what we try to do with the drug and predator problem, or you have law enforcement incarceration. So what is it here? And I think right now the only answer that I can come up with is education. And you have to look. Citizen journalists are great. A lot of information has been dug up. I talk to people in that world on a weekly basis, and I have people who give me information from that world, and much of it is very good, reliable information. But there are groups of people who are out there doing stuff that are not held to any sort of test of truth. And so these wild stories get out there. I mean, Alex Jones saying Chris Hansen's dead.
Yeah.
I feel pretty good as a cannabis, certainly.
It's just such a random thing.
It's just to us, it's a joke.
Where did it come from?
I don't know. It's just, I think it's scary that to us it's a joke, but to somebody it's serious. Well, yeah. Somebody's out there taking it like for a fact.
Well, I mean, and Andrew Schultz is a very clever, funny, good guy. Sure. And I had just an absolute blast being on the show, and the rest of the guys are super witty and smart too. They almost felt compelled to have me on the very next week,
just to prove it.
And we, the guys who produce my podcast and are involved in a number of other ventures with me, reached out and said, "Hey, we'll climb down there." And so, and it was a small part of the interview with them, and wide ranging, and it was great. But they, I think they wanted to say, God, we let this go on our show. We got to correct this. We've heard Hansen down here.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, because there are times I think, because he'll do any show, and I'm like, should we have Alex Jones on just because he's so out there to be kind of funny? But then do you give like we were offered Roger Stone, mm-hmm. and we thought about it, but then realized
at first we were a little bit into it. And then he started talking more.
Yeah, but do we want to give him a platform for this?
My test has always been, if you have to do so many disclaimers and ask so many questions, devil's advocate questions, to legitimize the fact that you have this person on, right. At what point do you reach a level of diminishing return? I mean, if you've got to have somebody on who you've just got to beat the Jesus out of for credibility, right. Where does that get you at the end of the day? Is it entertainment? Well, then that's fine if it's entertainment. Do you want to hear what Roger Stone has to say? That's legitimate too. But at some point it becomes this trap you get into where, in order to, be ethical about it, you got to go overboard to ask questions that take away from the meaning of the interview.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Chris? What are you working on? You have any other surprises up your sleeve?
We do. We've got a couple more investigations on the horizon having to do with the whole digital world and the personalities in the digital world allegedly committing predatory crimes. We've got the Predator, the new version of the Predator series that we're out doing, and we'll know where that's going to air on television very soon, and a number of other things in the works. The podcast has really taken off.
Yeah, so yeah, let's promote that as well. There's a podcast called Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen, which you can get anywhere that podcasts are available. You basically go through all of the different ones that you caught and kind of reflect on what they've done.
Where are they now?
Yeah, where are they now?
And we have interviews with people who were involved along the way. In fact, one of the interviews that we had was with the daughter of a predator, Dan Allen, who was busted in Riverside. And she just is so compelling and takes us into this world of what he did to the mother, his wife at the time, the impact on her as a child, the family, when they first saw the story, the show, and how she feared that somehow she may have inherited his monster DNA. And
wow.
Really compelling. And I find, people ask, only half jokingly, if I ever go to any sort of therapy because of the dark nature of the stories I cover. And I half jokingly say, no, I like to keep it all tucked away under this cabin. You keep all my nasty, dirty stuff. And, but it has been an interesting experience doing the podcast because I get to sort of, get to relive it in a way, but I also get to release it, and I get to think about it. And because in the early days of that particular franchise, we did a lot of different predators in one show in many cases. So we didn't really let each individual case breathe as much as we ultimately did in recuts and re-airing and Predator Raws and things like that. And so it's really the first time that I've really sat down to relive this, think about it, and put it into perspective, as well as figure out, okay, where is this guy now? Is this person changed their lives for good? Is this person still committing crime? Is this person dead? And how did he die? And so we're able to, through our own research and through contacts and very honestly, the very active and devoted TCAP community, which has, responded in a way that I couldn't have ever imagined in terms of helping with, finding out more information about these people. And so it's been great, and people seem to respond to it.
And you can follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Hansen, just to keep up on all the different projects that he's doing. He's involved in a lot of different things. And Chris, I can't thank you enough, not only for joining us, but for all of the years of coming into our homes, not just for Catch a Predator, and this is why I brought up everything beforehand, because you've been a major staple in some of the most critical moments in all of our lives, and you've brought it to us in a way that few people can say that they have. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's a great show, and good to be a part of it.
Much appreciated. All right,
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to wrap it up. I'll be right back. Thank you for, once again, you can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, but go to thewholepodcast.com and you'll be able to get every one of our episodes, all of our interviews. We have many more coming up. Thank you for listening to The Whole. I am Rob Sprans.
I'm Franco Del Valle.
I'm Lori Levine.